and welcome to the first episode of our new podcast, the German Learning Lab. I'm Alessio, and with me is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Alessio.
In this podcast, we're gonna discuss every week a topic concerning learning German or answering some questions from our students. And the topic we're gonna discuss today is, if it exists and what it is, the perfect, the ideal method, the ideal way to learn German. We are both German teachers, and we produced German learning courses and products. We're going to share our experiences and discuss these topics together. Michael, do you want to say something about the format of the podcast?
Yeah, we'll just take this question as an opener, right? And then see where it gets us. Usually we have longer discussions and they really lead us into the depth of the German learning experience or language learning experience even. Let's see where this leads us today. I'm curious. It's never clear where we end up, so exciting to be here with you.
Yeah, we don't have an outline. We haven't decided before what we're going to say. We have this kind of discussions privately when we meet, but also to prepare our courses, and we start these hour-long discussions. And we decided to start sharing them with our friends and students online. So this is how this podcast is conceived, is born. Today's topic, it's a big one. Just to start the conversation, we don't expect to cover all possible aspects of this big topic. The ideal way to learn German, the perfect way to learn German. We both thought about this topic because it's a question in the mind of many students. I've been asked many times, Alessio, please tell me, how should one learn this language, which is also a challenging one. Michael, what are your first thoughts about these kind of questions?
Well, it's actually a very obvious and easy answer, right? You just work with smarterGerman and you're fine. So we can stop here. Thank you for listening.
Exactly, we found it.
Yeah, how to start this, Alessio? The best method. What would that mean? What does it mean, the best method? That would be the first question that comes up. What do you think? What does it mean? Sorry to give that back to you so soon, but
it's a good question, right? So what the students want to know is what they should do. So what they should do in order to get the best results in the shortest time, with the smallest amount of resources, having the best time, right? I think that from this point of view, we actually can't find one single method in the sense of some exercises, right? So this wouldn't work. And I would even say for a specific person, for a single person, that method also doesn't exist, because a person changes going through the learning process of learning a language. So when you start learning a language, when you start learning German in this case, you will need a certain kind of exercises and certain amount and a certain composition of what you're training. But then when you are intermediate or when you're an advanced student, that combination, that diet will change. So I think even for a single student, I couldn't tell them, well, this is how you should train from now till fluency. So I think they're asking what you should do. But the question, what is the single method, is wrong. But maybe there is an answer for a specific student at a specific point of their learning career. And that is what I, as a coach, try to help them find.
Well, it's always a compromise, right? Between speed and quality in the end, because sure, you can learn some German very fast, but it might not be very good German, and it might not reach very far. But you can also stretch it eternally, but then you might lose momentum and aim for perfection. So to me, the perfect method or perfect approach would be a compromise between speed and quality. Yeah, like having, let's say, 80% quality is a good aim, because perfection is killing everything, and speed does the same. Yeah, speed is not, it's justifiable if you really just need to hack an exam because you need it for your citizenship or for an application, but that's really the only moment when it's acceptable in my eyes. Otherwise, a language is something to be enjoyed, to be discovered, and the discovery in high speed, where's the joy in that? Yeah.
So for you, a good method has to be a balanced one where you meet the right trade-off, right?
We have a choice, maybe. If you want to do speed, by all means, it's your decision, right? It's not my preference. But at least you have a choice where you can either run through things and get the gist of things, if that's what you need, or one where you can really go into precision and detail. Also, that might change. One day you might feel like doing something quick and dirty. The other day you might just want to dive into something and really feast on it. Why not? So choice is always a good thing.
I noticed also another trade-off you were mentioning, if I understood correctly, the trade-off between enjoyment and maybe hard work and doing those kinds of exercises which aren't exactly fun, but which yield results. And so there you also need probably a balance. And different people enjoy different things. So I've met students who love to do grammar exercises. They really enjoy just drilling through grammar exercises, which is something I don't enjoy.
I totally enjoy that.
So there is people with this kind of pleasure, and others who love to read, others who love to watch TV shows, or others who love to work on lyrics from songs. But for others, the same exercise will be toil, so will require discipline. So you have to find a mix which also fits the amount of discipline and the need for enjoyment of that specific student. So the balance you're talking about, also speed against good foundations. We spoke so many times about this topic, that some methods can yield good early results, so give you the feeling of having learned a lot in the first weeks, maybe months, but they're not giving you the foundations you need in order to reach fluency and speak good German. So this would be a whole other discussion, how this works and why. But this is the kind of trade-off. If a student really needs to somehow bootstrap their German in few weeks, well, maybe it's better to go for speed.
And the last point you have to elaborate. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that some students were in a rush speaking German, and so they weren't so interested in creating a good foundation to then learn German to level C1, C2, academic level, and so on. And my first reaction was, well, you could rush, prepare for the exam and just learn what you need in order to survive these first months, but you will pay the price later, right? But for them was okay, and would have been frustrating and hard to accept psychologically or socially, to put so much work in just building the foundations to then develop a better level of German.
I actually would like to still define method a bit clearer. So what I initially understood under method when I started this whole journey was what I would call today often a one-trick pony. So there is one thing there that they bloat up and say, this is the thing, this is what you have to do, and it will guarantee you success in short time. So whenever something like that shows up, I'd be skeptical at least, not saying it's not possible. But for example, I learned something called the Birkenbiel method, which basically consisted almost exclusively of translating foreign text into your native language word by word, literally, so that you can discover the structure. That is one technique. That's not a method. Yeah, it's the translation technique and a literal one on top of that. And I believed that in the past. I even translated the 10 Commandments or whatever into Turkish, or the other way around, from Turkish into German or English, until I realized, okay, this is one technique that's nice in a context of many other techniques that are well structured. So for me, a method is something that delivers a structure that carries me on, that keeps me going and provides me with just the right amount of challenge so that I'm not bored or overwhelmed. Of course, a method cannot deliver perfect adjustment, no matter how much AI you put on the title or on the homepage. This is the wet dream they are trying to sell to us, right? And I believed it for a while as well, especially initially when AI came out.
It's interesting because when you ask me, right away I interpret method as a set of tools, of techniques, right? And not as a single one. But you are completely right. It's the same thing. It happens with diets nowadays, right? That you should eat just one thing. You should eat just raw meat or just fruit, or I don't know, you should eat just that thing or avoid another one. There are also approaches based on avoiding something. In language learning, we still pay the price for the moment where we found out that just learning grammar wasn't enough, but has been sold as you should never learn any grammar, right? just practice the language. Children don't learn grammar, which is a bad approach. So studies show that actually to learn some grammar to a certain degree actually helps adults to learn faster, better, and so on. But yeah, so it's the same like gluten-free diets or sugar-free diets. You have to take something away and then everything gets healthy, or you have only to eat one single thing and everything will work out.
Where if you have a gluten allergy, sure, you leave the gluten away, right? So if you have a grammar allergy, take grammar away and see how far you get. But luckily, grammar allergy isn't too widespread, right? At least physical grammar allergy.
Yes.
So you should survive if you're exposed to a bit of grammar here and there.
Ask your doctor.
Zu Risiken und Nebenwirkungen fragen Sie einen Arzt oder einen Apotheker. The most horrible example of leaving something away is this approach where they teach you German using only German as an instructional language, claiming this is the superior way to teach you because you're always immersed in the German language. Nothing could be further from the truth. I know where it comes from. It has very solid origins from missionary work, because if you go to a tribe in the Amazon jungle, then sure, you cannot use their language because you don't know the language. So that's where it stems from. And then someone had the genius idea to make this into a product and sell that to people. And it is impressive that you can understand people without using a single word in your native language. But let's say after 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the intensity of your instruction, you will realize the limitations of this approach. And you will think it's your fault because I'm too stupid to understand this, because, you know, there's a teacher who has studied the art of teaching. I must be wrong. And this is where the misery starts.
So what happens is that there is a good criticism or good intuition, but then we overdo in a certain direction. This is something students do also on their own, but this is something that the system, so our culture and our school system and so on, also tends to do a lot. For example, what I observed about what you just said, learning a language, only using that language, which of course works if you're Italian like I am. Learning Spanish and French can somehow work out, but try learning Chinese or Japanese, just using Chinese and Japanese, you will tell me. So why it works are two reasons. So the first is that most of us learned their first foreign language in school. And in school, we have been taught by non-native usually. For example, Italian teachers who teach us English and learn English in school themselves, so the pronunciation is bad. We just learn by grammar exercises and so on. We don't actually practice the language. So when we come actually in touch with the language, we notice this gap. And so our thought is, what I actually needed was just to practice, just to use the language. So if I had the opportunity to practice the language from day one, then nowadays I would be fluent. But the mistake there is that when you notice that you missed something, it doesn't mean that that was the only thing you needed. It's like someone noticing I have a B12 deficiency, right? So going back to diet. So you're missing a vitamin, and then you think, I should have only have eaten that vitamin my whole life. Well, no, you have to add it. That's right. You have to add it, right? It can't be left out, but that wasn't everything you needed. So yes, you need native speakers. So I'm not a native speaker, for example, and I'm not German native speaker. So with my students, I don't practice conversation with them. I don't do that kind of interaction a native should have with them. But I help them to find ways to practice German with natives because it's an important part of their training. But I would never teach Italian to a German because this wouldn't work. But the second reason why it works, I think it's because of schools, because it's cost effective.
Yeah.
If you are a German school, like in Germany especially, and imagine you have 10 people who want to learn German. One is Italian, one is Turkish, one is Russian, one is Iranian, one is American, and so on, right? If you wanted to teach them using their language, you would need teachers who speak all these languages and also are able to teach German. But if your method is to teach German in German, you just need one teacher who is German and speaks German and can teach German, and you can make one class. So squeezing all these people from different backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds in one class, and let this single teacher teach them all. It's extremely cost effective.
But not for the student, right? Just for the school. So because you can really squeeze everyone in there no matter what, because they all start from scratch. If I know English or if I know Chinese, makes a huge difference. Yeah, so I bring different assets into the game or resources, no? Which are completely ignored in this approach, by the way. So if I don't use English to teach you German, I count on you that you make the connection between English and German, which not everybody really is able to. Yeah, simply because of not having enough practice or education in this field. It's a really hurtful approach, and many people also think they have no talent to learn German just because they sit there and I think, oh, why do I struggle with this concept? What is this with the articles? Why is it so difficult? Or the cases? These are simple concepts in principle. Of course, they require practice, and it's a lot of information that you really need to feed bit by bit to people. If you do it all at once and you have a couple of tables, that doesn't resonate. Yeah. So I agree. It's an economical thing, which is why it's successful, right? Economy rules. It's all about the money, ultimately. I'm not saying they're ill-will. The schools do the best they can, and the teachers are motivated. I have really rarely met an evil teacher, just some socially awkward ones.
No, teachers aren't the problem. It's a certain system which develops because of economical reasons, right, in this case.
Yeah, I believed that in the beginning. I started with Berlitz, which made this their main method. So I started this. I was fascinated by it. I learned it in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah? And then I was put into a classroom with people. But in Berlitz, you just open page 9, and then you do the method, which is just a set of exercises which are so repetitive. And at one point, you just get bored, also as a teacher. Yeah.
Well, because you spoke of this experience, actually with the same school, and I don't think we are telling any trade secret here, so no. I think it's okay. I had the same experience when I was living in a shared flat in Berlin. I had a lot of flatmates. We were students, and a lot of my young German flatmates at a certain point start working as teacher for Berlitz. And so they were just Germans. I mean, they had no background in linguistics. Nobody asked if they spoke other languages, whatever. Just native speakers, a young 20-something years old native speakers. And they have been schooled for 2 weeks, how to use the handbook, right? And put in classes. But then soon they start coming to me, asking me questions like, Alessio, look, today the student asked me why this sentence and this sentence are both correct but so different, or why this sentence is correct and this is wrong. What is this tense? What is the case? Why do the declensions work like this? And so I started having weekly meetings with them. So like after dinner, we all met for a couple of hours where I was explaining to these teachers who were teaching students every week how German works. They were the teachers, they were the native speakers, but they had no idea what they were doing.
Of course not.
They were just,
Yeah, that's not part of your training. No. There is no language training involved there if you are a teacher in such a school. That's the irony. They make a lot of money with this, right? So something works.
It's a good business model.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
So we're back to our question, what is the perfect method? So after I want to ask you about your approach, because you produce also courses that are not tailored for one specific person, but you have this problem, right? But because it's a problem, how do I create a product which I will give to a wide public and has to fit different needs and also has to be cost effective and so on? The problem with a lot of courses and methods and approaches is that they will make most of the students unsatisfied, or they will give a product which is not okay for them. So this is the problem I see. And as a student, I stopped with language classes right away after the first attempts. At university even, I wasn't going to the language classes because I wasn't learning anything. It wasn't interesting. So I started learning on my own. I had to be my own teacher. But I want to ask you, because you have way more experience with creating courses for a wide public, right? You cannot tailor classes for a single student, but you also have experience as a coach, coaching and teaching directly classes or single students. How do you go about this problem?
First of all, you cannot learn a language without a method. You can learn some language somehow without a method. Maybe some people put it together. Kids learn completely different than adults. That's completely out of the picture in case you think, oh, but kids don't have a method. Possibly they have, but they couldn't communicate. Or they also have certain development stages. So there is some kind of structure in there which is out of our influence. That is a completely different topic. The question is only which method you use. So I just offer one method, which is a collection of several exercises or techniques that I have found useful and efficient and effective over the last 25 to 30 years. Because I've been learning languages myself, tried everything, and certain things I stopped after a while because I got bored with it. I even now am trying Duolingo again. I get bored very quickly, but I can always squeeze out 5 to 10 minutes refreshing my Turkish, which I studied back in the days. I'm refreshing, not learning something new.
So you're saying you're using every possible technique, even Duolingo, right? Because you see some use even in Duolingo in small amounts.
I don't get anyway. If I really wanted to go deep into the language, Duolingo would stay 5 to 10 minutes a day maximum. I know I might be bored a bit of the time, and it's a waste of time to travel back and forth. But if I have a teacher that motivates me and I have a group that I enjoy, then I just enjoy the social aspect of things. And that kind of connects me with everything. So there is a upside to classes. The problem is there is very few classes and few teachers, very likely, in my experience, because I did 20 language classes. I remember one teacher that I actually enjoyed. Maybe two in school, back in school even. My Turkish teacher was a delight. What a pleasure. And she used German to explain complex matters to us. And that is where all the lights went on and was beautiful. It really helps you. And my aim is, of course, that at one point, the structure is inherent and you dare to dip out of the structure, go into the wild, because talking to natives is fun. I don't agree that you have to talk to natives. You can also learn completely without it. I spoke to natives, of course, but my English is basically based on watching TV and working in English on the internet and playing computer games, right? Yeah. But I started with having a girlfriend for 8 months. That gave me a good head start. But after that, I've never lived abroad. I offer a structure, and the structure is flexible enough so that we can adjust certain exercises. We can make them more difficult. We can make them lighter. There is flexibility in there, and I always help with that, of course, because it's difficult to do this on your own if you're not an experienced language learner. Yeah. Don't underestimate language learning just because we learn the first one by accident, or without our consciousness, because it's an unconscious process, right? Most of the time.
So if I understood you correctly, you're saying your approach is to offer a path, a structure in the sense of a direction and an array of exercises, of techniques, but then because there are online courses, then the students can choose if they want to do more or less of certain exercises based on how they feel about it, or add some other exercises, go out of the path and explore when they feel like.
Just follow the course, no matter what course, and see how it develops and whether you really have some progress after a couple of weeks, right? And if there's a problem, ask a teacher. If you're in a classroom, you pay a teacher to explain things to you. And you cannot say, oh, but I have 30 students. Yeah, but I paid you. So many students, I have Q&As, right, like tonight. So people come there and ask me questions while they're in a German class. I said, where's your teacher? Why don't you ask your teacher? Yeah, he doesn't have the time, or I don't dare to ask them. I said, what the fuck are you paying him for?
With teachers, the problem that many teachers are lovely and motivated, but they are often inexperienced. They haven't learned languages themselves. Yeah, I see a big gap between people teaching something they learned and teaching something they learned as children, but then they haven't learned again as adults. This is the reason why I wouldn't even teach Italian. I only teach languages I've learned as an adult, because I really like to have this kind of connection and understanding, right? Connection with my students, understanding of what they're going through. They are doing something I did myself when I was 25. I was 25 when I moved to Germany and I had to learn German. I really understand what it means to be an adult learning German, and for me, that is extremely important, but I also learned other languages, right? I keep learning new languages in order to keep being in this situation, in these learning experiences. So this is something, but you can do because you have online courses, right? Because in a class, it's harder. If you do 1 hour and you have 10 students, the activity, the exercises, you cannot vary them too much. You have to choose one activity, one set of exercises, and everybody, they're all doing the same thing at the same time. You cannot change speed, for example. This is something I always noticed. I was progressing faster than certain students or slower than others. Think, for example, in a class, you have an Italian, a Chinese, someone from Holland. They will progress at very different speeds.
The thing is called Binnendifferenzierung, so differentiation. But it requires a lot of skill, a lot of ability to really pull this off, and it requires, of course, the right audience. And I can only speak from my experience in all the language schools I worked with, and also the student report to me what they went through. It seems to be the exception to have such a very well differentiated class. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It needs a lot of looking, and maybe that brings us back to the question, right? How do I find the best method for me, right?
So maybe we can start going in that direction, because I think a lot of students now will start asking themselves, okay, but how do I find the method for me? So what should I do? Okay, let's go back from theory to practice. What should I do? So Michael, now I'm thinking about a student who is starting learning German right now and is learning German in a world where smarterGerman doesn't exist. We don't exist. There aren't courses with a structure that we like, that we created, right? What kind of advice could we give them, so her, him, on how to start this process, start on this path? What do you think? Would you say?
Well, I actually have to think back of my first experiences of learning a language, right? Which was English. Initially, I did some Spanish, Russian there just because I was curious, but we didn't have the internet back then. Keep that in mind. I had paper dictionaries and I had some books which I could find traveling half an hour somewhere. And I had only one private channel on TV, which luckily showed Star Trek Next Generation in original language. God knows why. That was 30 years ago, right? So don't overthink things. Get started. Start somewhere. Also see what drives you. Like, where is the fun? Where is the discovery, the motivation? Follow the motivation initially. Mm-hmm. And at one point you will feel the desire, or I need a bit more structure maybe. Then you try a couple of courses. If smarterGerman is not around, then you have to try other courses. You need to learn to listen a little, because like Alessio said, sometimes you might follow some approach and it will not lead you very far. And then you might be stuck there. So like, let's talk Duolingo. As lovely as it is produced, it will not get you very far. But it has its place in a bigger context. So don't get stuck on one technique. You need to learn to speak, to write, to listen, to read, and maybe some grammar might be good. So just try to find a bit of everything, ideally in as few places as possible. Because if you have 5 different places where you have to do these things, you're busy with organization a lot. Privately, I don't want to organize things. I just want to enjoy them. I want to click and be there. So that's the one thing. So try to find a place where all these things are covered. In the past, that was a course book by Langenscheidt or whatever. In my case, they had text or some exercises. It was a good start. And then at one point, I started adding real life stuff to it. So you can then watch real things like series, movies. You can listen to podcasts that use the language naturally. I do not recommend listening to podcasts or YouTube videos that teach you German. That's a completely different topic that we can cover in another time. Mm-hmm. It's okay not to have the perfect approach right away. It's a learning process. You will, over time, optimize your learning process. Very likely. Very likely. Yeah, it depends on, because if you keep an eye out and you read experiences and you look here, look there, maybe on Reddit, then you will get an impression, or certain things come again and again. Maybe I should try these. And be open, have an open mind, yeah?
I was thinking a student could ask, yeah, but how do I avoid being stuck with a method which is not working and maybe I don't realize? Or how do I avoid to be overwhelmed by all these options? Because maybe I find 10 different courses, maybe I find 10 different podcasts. So which TV show? If I start with the wrong one, maybe I have a bad experience. So how can I handle this complexity?
That's overthinking. That's exactly an example of overthinking. Just do one and see how you feel. Okay. Pay attention to how you feel when you do things. And if there's resistance, it might, it's a little bit of analysis work. Ideally, not everybody is necessarily capable of doing that. Maybe seek some counsel. Yeah, Alessio does counseling. I do counseling. Just find someone that can also talk to you about it, that has some experience with teaching and learning. And there's lots of people selling snake oil. Just be skeptical and explore, but don't overthink. Try and feel. And again, fun and motivation, these should be your guidelines. If you're stuck, you will feel you're stuck. You cannot not feel that you're stuck. You will have to do trial and error if there is no one around that has 25 or more years of experience. Look for people with experience that really want to help you and listen well.
I think what you're saying resonates a lot with my experience too, and with what I would recommend students to do. Starting with experience, exactly. One of the first things I do nowadays when I start learning a new language, personally, so because I don't have a coach myself, is I start reading. So you can teach me Chinese?
No, I can teach you how to learn Chinese. No, I can't.
Thank you.
Absolutely not.
So the first thing I do is to look for people who already did it, experts, and start reading about it, about their experiences, trying to learn from them. And not someone exactly saying, oh, I found this magic method. As you said, right, there is a lot of advertisement stunt out there. But I look for blogs, can also be vlogs, can be YouTube, whatever. It can be video, can be a podcast of people who went through it with success over a decade maybe, who became fluent, and where I notice that are also people capable of reflection, self-reflection. People who are commenting also their mistakes, what they tried out and didn't work and why. So, and this way, reading and listening about their experiences, I learn from their mistakes, from their attempts and what their failure and their successes. I learn a lot, and I have better chances of avoiding certain mistakes myself maybe, and trying from the very start techniques or approaches that maybe prove to be successful. But as you said, this isn't 100% safe. I mean, it doesn't assure 100% success. The second thing you said, that you have to try and see, you said how it feels, right? So what results it yields, or how do you feel when you do it, and so on. This is extremely important. This is actually something I also do as a coach. After the first meeting where I test the skills of the student and I ask questions, I got a picture of the situation and of the person. Often students are expecting me to say, okay, this is what you should do. So this is exactly what you're going to do for the next month, this thing first, this thing second, this many minutes a day, and so on. But my approach is more like, well, I would try this, but then please check how you feel when you do it. Just let me know how it's going every week when we meet. I want you to reflect and tell me how it felt and if you noticed it is helping you or not. And it's very important that the students learn to reflect their own experience, but also to take control of it, because this is something I think most people are missing, because we are so used to learn languages and many other things in school, where we are children, or we're treated as such. We're treated as children who cannot be their own coaches, cannot be their own trainers, cannot reflect their own experience and make their own choices. And people are also scared of making their own choices. They don't feel competent enough. And this is a feedback loop. This makes them helpless, unable to reflect and decide on their own. Also, this second thing you said, I think it's very important. Think about your experience. Yeah.
What also comes to mind when you say that is that I would always look for company in the sense of maybe a learning group. Not that you have to do the same level or same stuff, just that you really say, oh, I'm going to do my 20 minutes today, my hour tomorrow, and we do it at the same time. Or once a week we meet, we exchange what we've done, how we feel about it. Feeling is really crucial. Because you might fool yourself if you don't pay attention to your feelings, right? You can say, oh yeah, but I did 5 minutes of Duolingo today. That's not learning. So you're fooling yourself. If just spending time on something is an absolute worthless value, because the quality of the activity that you have done in the time, that actually matters. And then, of course, if you have high quality, then the amount matters. So you need both factors. See company, because it also helps with motivation. I have many online students, of course, right? Because I sell an online course. But I have Q&As where you can meet me. It's an in-person thing. 2-3 times a year, I meet people here in Berlin in person, whoever is there. And you can reach me in my community. All these places where you have human contact, even though it's maybe written or video, this makes a difference. Many people feel like, oh, I know you for a long time because they've seen me in videos, right? A human factor in learning is absolute key in language learning. If I replaced myself or my videos and my courses with AI clones of myself, even though they're excellent nowadays, you would feel this. You would feel this in the long run. AI still has to grow, but I'm not even threatened by it because you will always feel there's something missing.
Do you mean it's important to talk about your experience, your learning experience with other students or teachers, also in order to help you reflect it, right?
Also, yeah, anything.
Yeah, to become aware of it.
Like with any problem, it's nice to talk it through with someone who has maybe a different perspective or confirms your idea, which is also very soothing at times.
This is something that I don't like by some teacher influencers, polyglots, I don't know how to call them, on social media, that instead of creating content which inspires self-reflection and questioning and finding your own opinions, they try to give you the opinion. Also because they need some clickbaiting title like, this is what you're doing wrong, this is how you make it right, Polyglot explains how you scientifically learn languages, this kind of claims. And then they are really teaching you from top down what you should do, and they don't encourage discussion, reflection, sharing, and this kind of process. And this is, I think, is something we should surely do in this podcast, right? So our conversations isn't a way to tell students what they should do, but is a way to encourage this same kind of discussion and reflection we have. So how many times we had different opinions on how to do things, creating courses, right? I still remember the first time we created a course together, how many disagreements we had and how we went about it and learned from our discussions. I think this should be an important goal for this podcast.
Yeah, just to say, well, I agree that there's certainly people on YouTube, also polyglots, that might work this way. There's also many who genuinely really explore the language learning process. There's some really interesting ones out there. My favorite is Steve Kaufmann, who has been around longer than me even, possibly. I find myself agreeing to him, even though I haven't watched much in the past, but I know him, of course.
He's someone with a long experience, so he already got that kind of wisdom where he knows not to know, and he knows that there are a lot of stuff out there, a lot of different approaches. So he's a wise man, of course.
Don't fall for the Marktschreier, we call them. On the market, there's announcers. They say, fresh fish, €1, fresh fish, €1. We have that around the corner here, by the way. And so be careful. And honestly, anyone announcing anything like this, I wouldn't buy that fish, no matter how fresh he says it is. But this is one thing to keep in mind. So it's not a particular group of people, I say polyglots, but there's lots of teachers on YouTube, which honestly, my heart breaks watching that because it's just entertaining. And entertainment is fine, but entertainment and teaching together is always a compromise.
So back to our student starting learning German, I would recommend to look for courses or teachers that give you the possibility to try stuff out, first thing, and where the platform is very transparent about feedback. This is very important. I love to read actual feedback of actual students, also at the end of the course. This is something, for example, I loved from your community, for smarterGerman community, from day one, that in the forums you can read students writing long reports about their experience when they reach B2, when they reach C1, so how they went through it, because they're also celebrating the milestones with the community. And these aren't reviews like a short review, 5 stars, on a platform where maybe if it's your platform, you can even, erase them. They are actually conversations among people sharing that material, those courses. So these two things, first, that you can try things for free without any barriers. And second, where the feedback system, the experience of more advanced students is available to you in an unfiltered form, where you see also people who say, oh yeah, I didn't like this. So this is very important to choose what you try.
Okay. Yeah. There's often people writing me an email saying, oh, I don't want to make this public because it is a bit negative. I said, this is exactly why you make it public, because I can respond. I respond to everything, and I analyze and I talk about it and I ask questions about it, because often it is not that refined. Negative feedback is actually incredibly valuable for me as well as for you, because it's you expressing yourself and there is a preference in there. I agree. You should have the ability to test it also with language schools if you prefer class. Mm-hmm. Why not have a trial lesson or a reduced lesson? Don't book 6 months right away, because you don't know what you're getting into. And you're stuck with €1,000 contract, right?
Yeah.
Test the waters, see whether the vibes are good. How do you feel? Is the teacher respectful? Are the people in class your peeps? And don't be afraid to make mistakes. If you realize you made a mistake, cut it, go. Yeah. Do something else. Don't cry over lost money. If you realize you have a 6-month contract and after the first month you feel this is horrible, get out of it. The 5 months can destroy all your love for the German language. The money you can always remake, but your motivation is incredibly hard to regain.
I was thinking, how can we close? What is the last things we want to discuss? So we started with the question, is there a perfect method? We decided actually no, there are approaches, methodologies, structures, exercises. I think we agree on these, and we came to this point at the end where we gave this advice on how to choose materials, courses, and so on. I think the last question we could very rapidly answer is, what are the elements that should always be present so that the student has a checklist? What is the minimum requirement for learning German, in your opinion? Very fast, you have 1 minute.
Reading, listening, writing, grammar, and a little bit of curiosity. Pronunciation is included in speaking, right? So these things need to be present. Even though you might think, I don't want to learn to speak, some people just want to read and listen. Why not? Why not give it a try? It adds to the experience. It gives a sensual experience even over reading and listening. Listening is also sensual, but speaking is, everything moves here, and I feel my chest, I hear my voice. Just add it to it without the pressure of having to reach a certain level.
For German, if you have to put in order from the most important to the relatively less important, these things you said, right? For the first 3 months of learning, because long term, everything is important. First 3 months of learning, what are the most important activities for a student?
All of them. There's no such thing as most important.
You cannot. Okay.
No, it makes no sense. Why? So, of course, you need to learn vocabulary, right? Even if you listen, you need to know vocabulary. You need to writing, reading. All is part of vocabulary. The question is, how do you acquire vocabulary? It's easiest by reading. So reading actually precedes all others, if you ask me, and is a good source of vocabulary and helps you in a way with listening a little bit, because when I listen, I can imagine how it's written. So reading, I can do in front of my inner eye even when I'm listening. So there is a little of an overlap. And reading is part of writing as well. When I write, I read. I would do them all balanced enough in the beginning.
That would be nice. But if I had to choose, because some people maybe have to choose, right? They don't have the time or the resources, or they're very concerned about one of the components. Maybe it's not the most urgent one. With German specifically, at least for Europeans or for European languages, people coming from European languages, I would say the most important things for me at the beginning is reading and listening. Probably with German in this order, because German has a very specific structure, which is different from many other languages. So for Italian speakers, French speakers, Spanish speakers, English speakers, it's very important to read German, to have the time to learn where things go. So reading is the most important. Listening. Then I would put speaking before writing, because I think that listening and speaking has to be connected without doing too much what you described. So reading in their head, because otherwise pronunciation can be tricky, what happens there. And grammar, I would just sparkle a little bit on top of it, like step by step, maybe 50 minutes a day, not too much. So this is how I would answer.
The question is how you introduce it, right? Look, you can write simple things in the first lesson. And actually, my writing in the first lesson is typing things off the screen. and remembering it quickly. Short-term memory. You don't create sentences. Same with speaking. You don't have a conversation right away. That's an overwhelm. I totally agree. These things have to be done very gently. The speaking and the writing. Absolutely agree. Yeah. Even listening.
I was thinking about someone not having a course like smarterGerman, right? Someone who has to do it on their own. So this is how I would prioritize things. Also because I think that become able to read and to understand by listening is a priority than to bootstrap the language. And a lot of people focus too much on speaking and writing. Actually, most courses, and in school too, push too much speaking and writing, and so people get used to it. They want to be able to speak and write at the same level as they understand, which is crazy in my opinion. There must be a gap there. So you must be able to understand way more of what you're able to express. That's why I would prioritize reading and listening.
Many people think, when will I be able to speak? I said, why don't you take 6 months of really getting the language in first before you try to produce something complex yourself? So there's even a whole approach dedicated to this, which is called the silent approach, which I don't agree with because it's overdoing things. But that's the most difficult thing with speaking, because it's daring, it's fearful, because you speak, you present yourself weak. Yeah, because you don't say it perfectly. There's so many components that come in there. So I totally agree with your approach in this regard.
Yeah, I think we have to wrap it up. I mean, I would keep talking with you. Maybe we'll keep talking later. But for the podcast, we have to close it here. I hope our listeners enjoyed listening to us and maybe learn something or have new questions, new thoughts.
I'm pretty sure. From my side, I enjoyed our conversation. We had similar conversations before, but it's always, new nuances, new elements in there. And it's just a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And what is the next topics for next week? We don't know. So we will surprise ourselves during the week, finding a topic. And see you next week.
See you next week, Alessio. Have a lovely day.
Bye.